Today, I'm turning myself into a scene queen. And by the end of this video, I'm gonna go out in public to get people's brutally honest reactions. Let's get into it. This is one of the most insane looks I've ever attempted. And if you weren't chronically online back then, scene queens were literally the most controversial, chaotic, and iconic girls during the 2000s. They had cult followings, massive catfights, and some of the darkest drama you'll ever see on the internet.
You guys have ruined my life!
And everything about the aesthetic was meant to be extreme, including the eyebrows. Whether you were scene or just mainstream, eyebrows were really going through at the time. They were plucked super thin, and if you looked hard enough, a lot of them looked like this sort of comma shape. But for some scene queens, tweezing wasn't enough. Famous MySpace icons like Jeffree Star and Verena Schizophrenia weren't trying to look traditionally pretty. They wanted to look intimidating. And it wasn't just part of the look. It made sure nobody messed around with you. Because back then, the MySpace community was pretty much like the movie Mean Girls. It was insane. Like, people would literally rank their top 8 friends on their profile for the whole world to see, and getting bumped down a spot could destroy an entire friendship overnight. So if you wanted to stay relevant, you had to get extreme, and the scene community really pushed that to its limits. In the beginning, it started off pretty simple, but as more girls started fighting for that top spot, the makeup just got bolder and bolder. But it wasn't just about outdoing each other. There was actually a bigger reason for that nobody seems to really talk about. Back then, people obviously didn't have iPhones or 4K cameras, but they did have these very cheap digital cams or sidekick phones, which meant the quality was terrible. If you did any sort of natural makeup, it wouldn't show up on camera. So the only way to look good in a MySpace selfie was to really pack the pigment on. And while it looks pretty good on camera, I am a little bit worried to see how people react to it later on. But if there was one thing scene queens couldn't skip over, it was the eyeliner. You don't really have to be neat with this part. In fact, if it looked a bit messy and chaotic, that was even better. But over time, the makeup started changing. It wasn't just heavy black eyeshadow anymore. People were now experimenting with graphic liner, cut creases, and even rhinestones. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do today, but I'm gonna mix it with something that most scene kids love: animal print. Back in 2008, animal print wasn't just exclusive to scene, it was everywhere. And it's funny, because it didn't just change how people dressed, it completely took over the internet. If you were on MySpace or even Facebook at the time, you could not escape people commenting "RAR XD" on absolutely everything, which for some odd reason, we all agreed meant "I love you" in dinosaur. But although a lot of people remember scene as a super fun and creative era, there's also a really dark history behind it. Most people within the community were pretty young, and the majority of scene queens were only teenagers when they were posting and uploading these photos online. And unfortunately, that attracted a lot of the wrong attention, especially on a site called Sticky Drama. This was probably one of the most racist, homophobic, and misogynistic websites at the time, and it was nothing like the sort of tea pages we see today. It was a forum that thrived on humiliation. The site became an obsession for people who wanted to destroy these scene queens' lives, and there was one girl in particular who they bullied the most: Kiki Cannibal. Kiki was everywhere on Sticky Drama, and every day, people hated on what she wore, who she talked to, and even who she dated, which all took a dark turn back in 2007. At the time, Kiki was just 14 years old, and she was being groomed by a 19-year-old named Daniel Cespedes, who she had met through MySpace. And on October 20th, police finally tracked him down and arrested him in Aventura Mall. But when a gust of wind scattered an officer's paperwork, Daniel took the chance to escape and threw himself over the railing. He had tried to aim for a dumpster, but caught his foot and fell 2 floors down directly onto the pavement. He ended up in a coma, and 3 months later, he passed away. But things didn't stop there. Months after his funeral, somebody posted a Sticky Drama with an article titled "MySpace Murder Mystery," and attached to it was a photo of Daniel laying in his coffin. The article claimed, with absolutely zero evidence, that teenage Kiki had somehow plotted with police to set him up as revenge for their breakup, and the comments that followed were disgusting. People were blaming Kiki for his death, threatening to unalive her, and attacking her entire family. But that sort of bullying also explains why scene kids stayed in their own little bubble. When the mainstream world was constantly dragging you down, you didn't want to look anything like them. Back in 2008, everyone was either watching The Simple Life or Jersey Shore, and thanks to people like Paris Hilton and Snooki, those shows basically turned dark orange tans into the biggest trend of the decade. So the scene community decided to rebel against that. To them, looking pale was a goal, and that only escalated when sites like Vampire Freaks or movies like Twilight really started to blow up. But there was actually a practical purpose for it too. If you look at scene queen icons like Audrey Kitching or Amber Caitlin Beale, that super pale skin acted like a blank canvas, which made their neon hair and crazy clothing pop even more. And the foundation at the time had to be heavy duty, matte, and completely caked on. This was the same era that Maybelline's Dream Matte Mousse was at its peak, and if you couldn't physically see the makeup sitting on your face, you weren't wearing enough. And while the public might hate how heavy this makeup is, it kinda had to be this way to survive an entire day at Warped Tour. If you were a scene kid, Warped Tour was the biggest event of the year, and it was this all-day music festival that was usually held in the middle of summer. People would be standing in the heat for up to 10 hours, moshing out to bands like Asking Alexandria or Bring Me the Horizon. And if your makeup wasn't set with enough powder to survive a hurricane, it would melt off your face before the first band even hit the stage. But the drama backstage was just as brutal as the heat. A lot of the old school punk bands absolutely hated the newer groups and were constantly gatekeeping who deserved to be there, and there was one band in particular who got it worse than anyone: Broken Side. These guys were basically the kings of crunkcore, which was this new music genre that mixed heavy metal screamo and upbeat club music. And if you think that sounds weird, most people thought so too, which is why they were hated on by almost everyone on that tour. Other bands would get on stage and trash talk them in front of thousands of people every night. It even got so bad that some moms literally started a group called Mothers Against Broken Side. But while scene music might have been over the top, their lips were the exact opposite. In the scene world, people didn't want their lips to stand out. They wanted them to completely disappear. So the easiest way to do that was to grab your makeup sponge and blend your foundation all over your mouth. A lot of people would then leave it as is, but if you ever wanted to be a bit extra, you could always go ahead and top it off with a lip gloss, which in most cases was either a clear or bright bubblegum pink. And if I'm gonna be honest, I think a big reason why nude lips became so popular at the time was probably out of pure laziness. When you've already spent 2 hours teasing your hair and 40 minutes on your eyeshadow, it doesn't really make sense to spend another 20 minutes trying to outline the perfect lip shape. But keeping the lips simple wasn't just about saving time. It allowed people to shift the spotlight away from their face and onto something far more important: the clothes. Band tees were the go-to clothing option for most scene kids at the time. And out of all the bands from that era, the Millionaires were my absolute favorite. The Millionaires first started off by just messing around with songs on GarageBand, but as soon as they uploaded their first song, I Like Money, they completely blew up. Within weeks, they were the biggest thing on MySpace, and you couldn't go anywhere without hearing songs like Alcohol or Just Got Paid, Let's Get Laid. Their influence was massive. So massive, in fact, that a major record label took notice, and not long after, a brand new artist suddenly appeared with the same heavy autotune and exact party girl persona. Her name was Kesha. Before the song TikTok even dropped, fans were already calling it out online because the similarities were undeniable. And according to the Millionaires, it wasn't just a coincidence. They claimed Kesha's producer, Dr. Luke, admitted to stealing everything they had built. And while he might have copied their music, he could never replicate their hair. Unfortunately for me, my natural hair isn't really built for this, so I'm gonna be washing and styling a wig instead. I've never actually styled a wig before, and I barely even do my own hair, so this was definitely one of the hardest things I think I've ever done in my life. And after spending literally 3 hours covering this wig in hairspray, I was actually starting to taste it in the back of my throat. But right now, this wig is looking a lot more emo than it actually does scene. So to fix that, let's add these raccoon tails to really make it look the part. These types of extensions were the ultimate scene symbol, and the commitment to it was wild. If you were like most scene kids, you couldn't really afford to go to a salon. So if you wanted to fit in, you just have to get creative. People started buying synthetic hair extensions, laying them flat on a piece of cardboard, and using thick black Sharpie to draw the lines on themselves. And honestly, it worked pretty well, up until you stepped into the rain, and all that ink would ruin your clothes. But even with the stripes, the hair still feels a bit unfinished, at least until you start piling on the random accessories, like this little blue bow. And I know that this is really gonna make me stand out in public, but that's actually the whole point. And of course, you couldn't be a scene queen without a crown, and tiaras were one of the best ways to show you were MySpace royalty. But as iconic as they are, the jewelry is what really seals the deal. And for most people, that meant Monster can tabs. Back in 2008, Monster was basically the official drink of the community, and soon enough, people became so obsessed with the brand that they started upcycling the cans in order to make things like necklaces or even colorful bracelets. And while our ears are decorated, I think our face should be too. The main piercing everyone loved at the time were something called snake bites, which are just these two little rings on the sides of your bottom lip. And if somebody didn't have those, they usually had some angel bites, chunky septums, or even in some cases, cheek piercings. And now with all these piercings popped on, we can move on to the actual jewelry, which were either these giant knuckle dusters or these diamond acrylic charms. Kiki Cannibal still sells these types of jewelry pieces today, but since I couldn't really afford to pay $200 or $300 for a piece of plastic, I went ahead and bought some clay in order to make some myself. I didn't actually have any proper tools to do this, so I was literally using a bottle of wine as a makeshift roller, and pretty much anything else I could find. But then came the scary part, which was cutting everything out. I was so afraid of messing this step up, especially because there was no going back, but once I punched out all these holes and negative spaces, I had to clean up the edges by filing it. This was probably the most tedious part of the process, and also one of the messiest, but it was the most important thing to do, especially for a perfectionist like me. But while they were starting to look pretty cool, they still looked a little bit plain, which just meant I had to cover them completely in rhinestones. I loved doing this so much, and between rhythmically gluing them on and jamming out to the millionaires, I actually feel like I reached flow state, and I am genuinely so proud with how both of these turned out. And while I was still in the DIY mood, I also went ahead and made a bunch of these little candy bracelets. These were basically a form of currency in the scene world, and kids would spend hours making them just to trade them away at concerts, and by the end of the night, you'd usually have a stack on each one of your arms. And right now at this time, I've literally spent 5 hours turning myself into a scene queen. But now comes the part that I've been dreading the most, going out in public and getting people's reactions. I've never been this nervous in my entire life. And at first, nobody really seemed to be paying much attention, but it didn't take long for people to start turning their heads. These whole group of guys are just looking at me. Yo! What would you guys rate this look?
I'd say 0.
I agree with
0?
I agree with him.
There's nothing you like about it?
No, it's a good fit. I just think, too many piercings.
10. I love it.
What would you guess it is?
Okay, it might be scene. Is scene correct?
It is scene.
Yeah.
I was actually starting to relax a bit after hearing some of those nice comments, but that feeling didn't really last too long.
I don't like it.
Why don't you like it?
Just don't.
This is bad, though, look.
This is definitely a whole lot better.
But you could buy your family with this.
Oh, you're saying my family's cheap?
No, I'm saying that it's pricey.
Can I ask your opinion about this look?
I love it. It's
Love
so,
it?
It's so good.
I love your
it
style
so
as
much.
well.
Thank you.
What would you consider yourself? Would you say you're gothic?
Probably goth. I don't know. I listen to a lot of goth music.
I have never been a fan of goth. It looks depressing.
Well, you're a very attractive girl, and it's an interesting look.
How would you rate it from scale to 1 to 10?
Like a 6 or a 7. 6, yeah.
6 or a 7.
I reckon
7. I'm actually having a lot more fun now, and it's honestly really interesting to see how people are rating the look.
Honestly, I'd probably a 1. I'm more of a traditional person, so
Like
I
natural?
so just like long sleeves, going to a Catholic mass. Yeah, not a fan.
I quite like the look, you know. It's a good
Yeah.
look. Very nice. Normal, you know. I love the eyeshadow.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful.
And after a full day spent as a scene queen, I finally managed to find some people that I think I fit right in with. It's honestly so nice to see other people embracing these sorts of styles, and I really hope more people can eventually do the same. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye!